The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Training Center's parade ground as Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the taxi. She pulled her small suitcase behind her, its wheels making a soft clicking sound against the concrete. The building in front of her looked massive and intimidating, with its gray walls and perfectly trimmed lawns. Other recruits were arriving too, some with their families hugging them goodbye, others alone like her. Sarah adjusted the straps of her backpack and took a deep breath. This was it, the beginning of something she had dreamed about for years. She was 23 years old, with shoulder-length brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her jeans and plain white shirt made her look like any college graduate starting a new job. Nothing about her appearance suggested what she was truly capable of. That was exactly how she wanted it. Sarah had learned long ago that being underestimated could be an advantage. As she walked toward the registration desk, she noticed a group of recruits gathered near the entrance. They were mostly men, tall and muscular, talking loudly about their athletic achievements, and why they had joined the Navy. Their voices carried across the courtyard with confidence and excitement. "I played college football for 3 years," one of them said, flexing his arms. "This training is going to be easy compared to our preseason workouts." Another one laughed and added, "I ran marathons back home. They say the physical tests here are tough, but I'm not worried at all." Sarah walked past them quietly, not making eye contact. She had no interest in joining their conversation or proving anything to strangers. She knew that actions would speak louder than words in the coming weeks. Her father had taught her that lesson when she was just a child. At the registration desk, a stern-looking officer checked her papers and handed her a folder with her room assignment and schedule. "You're in Block C, room 214, he said, without looking up. "Orientation starts at 1400 hours. Don't be late." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, taking the folder. She found her room easily enough. It was small and simple, with 2 bunk beds, 2 desks, and 2 lockers. One side was already occupied. Her roommate had arrived earlier and left her belongings neatly arranged. Sarah chose the empty bunk and started unpacking her few possessions. She didn't bring much, just the essentials and one photograph that she placed on the small shelf above her bed. The photo showed her as a little girl, standing next to a tall man in a Navy uniform. Her father, Captain Robert Mitchell, the man who had shaped everything she would become. The door opened suddenly, and a young woman walked in. She was short and energetic, with curly red hair and freckles across her nose. Her smile was immediate and genuine. "Hi. You must be my roommate." "I'm Jessica Torres," she said, extending her hand. Sarah shook it. "Sarah Mitchell. Nice to meet you." Jessica sat on her bunk and started talking rapidly. She explained that she was from Texas, had worked as a lifeguard for 2 years, and joined the Navy because she wanted adventure and purpose. Sarah listened politely, offering small nods and brief responses. Jessica didn't seem to mind that Sarah wasn't equally talkative. Some people just needed to express their nervousness through words. When it was time for orientation, they walked together to the main hall. The room was filled with over 200 new recruits, all sitting in rows of metal chairs. The noise level was high as people introduced themselves and shared their backgrounds. Sarah sat quietly in the middle row, observing everything. At the front of the hall stood 3 officers in crisp uniforms. The one in the center stepped forward, and the room gradually fell silent. He was a tall man, with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to examine every person in the audience. "I am Commander Harris," he announced, his voice carrying authority. "For the next 12 weeks, this facility will be your home, your school, and your proving ground. Some of you will excel. Some of you will struggle. And some of you will not make it to graduation day. That is the reality of naval training." He went on to explain the schedule, the rules, and the expectations. Physical training would start at 0500 hours every morning. Academic classes would cover navigation, maritime law, basic engineering, and communication systems. There would be swimming tests, combat training, and team exercises. Everything was designed to push them to their limits and beyond. After the orientation ended, the recruits were divided into groups of 25. Each group would train together, eat together, and compete against other groups throughout the program. Sarah found herself in Group 7. as they assembled outside for their first meeting with their training instructor. She noticed that several members of the loud group from the morning were also in her unit. Their instructor was a woman named Petty Officer First Class Linda Chin. She was short but powerfully built, with black hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She walked back and forth in front of them like a predator assessing prey. "Listen up," Chen barked. "I don't care who you were before you walked through those gates. I don't care if you were a star athlete or valedictorian or homecoming queen. Here, you are all the same. You are all beginners. You are all novices. And my job is to transform you into sailors worthy of wearing this uniform." She stopped in front of a tall recruit named Marcus, the one who had bragged about playing college football. "You think you're strong?" she asked him. Marcus straightened his shoulders. "Yes, ma'am. We'll see," Chen said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She moved on, stopping briefly in front of each recruit, studying them. When she reached Sarah, she paused longer than usual. "What about you?" Chen asked. "What makes you think you belong here?" Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I'm here to serve, ma'am, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes." Chen nodded slowly, something flickering in her expression that might have been approval. Then she moved on to the next recruit. The first week was brutal. They woke before dawn and ran 5 miles before breakfast. The physical training sessions left everyone sore and exhausted. Many recruits complained openly, struggling to keep up with the demanding pace. Marcus and his friends, despite their earlier confidence, found themselves gasping for air during the morning runs. Their muscles, trained for different kinds of activities, weren't prepared for the relentless endurance requirements of naval training. Sarah, on the other hand, moved through the exercises with quiet efficiency. She didn't finish first in the runs, but she never fell behind. During push-ups and sit-ups, she maintained perfect form while others began to falter. In the swimming pool, she cut through the water with smooth, practiced strokes that made it look effortless. Some people in her group began to notice, though not in a positive way. "Look at her," one recruit whispered to Marcus during a break. "She's barely sweating while we're all dying here." Marcus frowned, watching Sarah as she stood calmly by the water fountain. "Maybe she's just hiding how tired she is. Wait until we get to the real challenges." But the real challenges only made Sarah's abilities more obvious. During the obstacle course runs, while others climbed clumsily over walls and crawled slowly under barbed wire, Sarah moved with precision and speed. Her technique was flawless. She knew exactly where to place her hands and feet, how to distribute her weight, when to push harder, and when to conserve energy. By the end of the second week, she had the third best time in the entire company of 200 recruits. The only 2 people ahead of her were veteran athletes who had been training specifically for military service for years. This didn't sit well with Marcus and several others in her group. They had come to boot camp expecting to dominate the physical challenges. They had been the stars in their previous lives, the ones people looked up to and admired. Now they were being outperformed by a quiet woman who never boasted, he never showed off, and never seemed to struggle. During a lunch break, Marcus sat with his friends at a table in the mess hall. Sarah was a few tables away, eating alone and reading from a training manual. "There's something weird about her," Marcus said, keeping his voice low. "Nobody is that good without showing it off. She's probably faking half of it." His friend Jake nodded. "Maybe she's done this kind of training before. Like maybe she went to some fancy private boot camp or something." Or maybe another friend named Derek added with a smirk, "She's just getting lucky. Wait until we get to the combat training next week. That's where real strength matters." They all laughed, feeling better about themselves. It was easier to believe that Sarah's performance was due to luck or some trick, rather than accepting that she might simply be better trained than they were. Jessica, who sat nearby and overheard their conversation, felt a surge of anger. She had become friends with Sarah over the past 2 weeks and knew that her roommate worked harder than anyone else in their group. Every night after lights out, Jessica could hear Sarah doing extra exercises in the darkness, pushing herself even further. Sarah never complained, never made excuses, and never drew attention to her efforts. But Jessica didn't say anything to defend her friend. She had learned in her own life that sometimes the best Response to mockery was silence and continued excellence. The following Monday brought a new challenge: combat training. The recruits were divided into pairs and taught basic defensive and offensive techniques. They practiced on thick mats in a large gymnasium, learning how to fall properly, how to break holds, and how to disable an opponent without causing serious injury. Petty Officer Chen demonstrated each move with careful precision, then watched as the recruits attempted to replicate what she had shown them. Most struggled with the coordination required. The movements looked simple when Chen performed them, but executing them properly required balance, timing, and body awareness that most novices didn't possess. Sarah was paired with a woman named Kelly, who was friendly and enthusiastic, but clearly new to any kind of physical combat. They practiced the techniques slowly at first, with Kelly attempting to grab Sarah in various holds, while Sarah demonstrated the proper defensive responses. Across the gym, Marcus was paired with Derek. They were both competitive and athletic, throwing each other around with more force than necessary, trying to prove who was tougher. Several times, Chen had to stop them and remind them that this was about learning technique, not winning fights. After an hour of practice, Chen called everyone to attention. "Now we're going to do a demonstration," she announced. "I need a volunteer to help me show the complete sequence we've been working on." The gym fell silent. Nobody wanted to be the one thrown around by their instructor in front of the entire group. Chen's eyes scanned the room and landed on Sarah. "Get up here." Sarah stood and walked to the center of the mat. She showed no nervousness, no hesitation. She simply positioned herself and waited for instructions. "Attack me," Chen ordered. "Use the sequence we just practiced." Sarah moved immediately, executing the attack pattern with sharp precision. Chen defended easily, of course, being far more experienced. But what surprised everyone watching was how committed and technically sound Sarah's movements were. She wasn't holding back or being tentative like most beginners. She attacked as if she had done this hundreds of times before. Chen blocked, redirected, and then demonstrated the countermove, taking Sarah down to the mat in one smooth motion. Sarah fell correctly, rolling with the momentum and immediately getting back to her feet. "Again," Chen said. "Faster this time." They went through the sequence 3 more times, each repetition increasing in speed and intensity. By the 4th time, they were moving so fast that it was hard for the watching recruits to follow what was happening. Sarah matched Chen's pace without error, her body responding instinctively to each movement. When they finished, Chen stepped back and nodded at Sarah. "Return to your position." As Sarah walked back to her spot, she could feel dozens of eyes on her. The atmosphere in the gym had changed. The casual mockery and dismissive attitudes from before were replaced by confusion and a hint of respect. Even Marcus looked unsettled, his earlier confidence shaken. During the lunch break that followed, the whispers started in earnest. The mess hall buzzed with conversation as recruits dissected what they had witnessed. During combat training, Sarah sat at her usual corner table with Jessica, eating her lunch in silence, while half the room stared in her direction. She could hear fragments of conversations from nearby tables, people speculating about her background and abilities. Marcus sat with his group, his jaw tight with frustration. The demonstration had embarrassed him more than he wanted to admit. He had spent years building his identity around being physically superior to others, and now this quiet woman was making him and his friends look incompetent. "She must have military training already," Derek said, pushing his food around his plate. "Maybe she's former army or something and switched branches." Jake shook his head. "They don't let you do that. You can't go through boot camp twice. And maybe her dad was military and trained her," Marcus suggested. "That has to be it. Nobody just naturally moves like that." What Marcus didn't know was that he was partially correct. Sarah's father had indeed been military, and he had trained her. But the full truth was far more complex than any of them could have guessed. That evening, Sarah sat on her bunk, writing in a journal while Jessica did homework at her desk. The small room felt peaceful after the intensity of the day. Sarah's hand moved across the page in neat, controlled handwriting, recording her thoughts and observations. It was a habit her father had taught her. a way to process experiences and track personal growth. Jessica turned around in her chair. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah looked up. "Sure. Where did you learn to fight like that? I mean, you made it look so easy today." Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering how much to reveal. She had grown comfortable with Jessica over the past weeks, and sensed that her roommate could be trusted. But some stories were harder to tell than others. "My father was in the Navy," Sarah finally said. "He started teaching me self-defense when I was 7 years old. By the time I was a teenager, we were training together almost every day." Jessica's eyes widened. "Wow, that's amazing. Is he still serving?" Sarah's expression flickered with sadness. "He died 4 years ago. Heart attack. He was only 48. "I'm so sorry," Jessica said softly. Sarah nodded, accepting the sympathy. "He always said I had natural talent, that if I ever chose to serve, I could go far. I guess this is my way of honoring his memory." What Sarah didn't mention was the rest of the story. Her father hadn't been just any naval officer. Captain Robert Mitchell had been part of an elite special operations unit, though Sarah only learned the full details after his death. When she went through his personal belongings, she found journals, training manuals, and records of missions that were still partially classified. She discovered that the man who had taught her everything had operated at the highest levels of naval combat expertise. The training he had given her throughout her childhood wasn't just basic self-defense. It was the same conditioning and technique development used for Special Forces operatives. He had been preparing her for something, though she never fully understood what until after he was gone. The next morning brought another challenge that would further separate Sarah from her peers: water survival training. All recruits were required to demonstrate their ability to stay afloat in full uniform, tread water for extended periods, and perform rescue techniques. The training took place in the Olympic-sized pool on the base, with Petty Officer Chen and 2 other instructors supervising. The recruits lined up at the pool's edge in their combat uniforms, boots and all. The weight of the wet clothing would make swimming much more difficult than normal. Many of the recruits looked nervous. A few admitted they were not strong swimmers, even under normal circumstances. Chen explained the first test. "You will jump into the pool, remove your boots while treading water, and then swim to lengths of the pool without stopping. Anyone who touches the side or bottom fails, and will repeat this test tomorrow. Begin when I call your name." The first recruit jumped in and immediately struggled. The weight of his uniform dragged him down, and he fought to keep his head above water. He managed to get his boots off, but barely completed 1 length before the safety instructor had to help him out. He sat at the pool's edge, coughing and embarrassed. Others fared better, but still showed visible strain. Marcus, despite his athletic background, found the exercise challenging. He completed it, but emerged from the pool breathing heavily and looking frustrated. When Chen called Sarah's name, the entire group watched with heightened attention. Sarah walked to the edge calmly, took 1 deep breath, and jumped in. The moment she hit the water, her body shifted into practiced efficiency. She treaded water easily while removing both boots in less than 15 seconds, then began swimming with long, powerful strokes that propelled her through the water at remarkable speed. She completed the first length, executed a perfect flip turn, and continued for the second length without any visible fatigue. When she reached the end, she pulled herself out of the pool in 1 smooth motion and stood at attention, barely winded. Chen looked at her stopwatch and then at Sarah. "No. 2 minutes, 18 seconds. That's the fastest time we've had in 6 months." There was no praise in her voice, just a statement of fact. But several recruits heard it, and the whispers started again. The water training continued for the next 3 hours with increasingly difficult challenges. They had to rescue weighted dummies from the bottom of the deep end. They had to swim underwater for specific distances. They had to demonstrate proper drowning victim rescue techniques. Sarah excelled at every single task, moving through the water like someone who had been born in it by the time training ended. The dynamic in Group 7 had shifted dramatically. The mockery and dismissiveness from the first weeks had been replaced by a mix of respect, jealousy, and confusion. Most recruits simply accepted that Sarah was exceptionally skilled and focused on their own improvement. But Marcus and a few others found it harder to let go of their wounded pride. That evening, Sarah walked back to her barracks alone. Marcus and Derek intercepted her on the path. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the base, and there were few other people around. "Hey, Mitchell," Marcus called out. "Got a minute?" Sarah stopped and turned to face them. She read the body language immediately, the aggressive postures, the fake casual tones hiding real hostility. She had seen this kind of confrontation before, in various forms throughout her life. "What do you need?" she asked neutrally. Marcus stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate her. "We've been watching you. You're good, I'll give you that. But I don't think you're as good as everyone seems to think. I think you've just been lucky with the specific tests they've given us so far." Sarah didn't respond, just maintained steady eye contact. Derek joined in. "Yeah, and we're tired of you making the rest of us look bad. Maybe you should dial it back a little. Stop trying so hard to be the star of the show." Sarah felt a flash of anger but kept it controlled. Her father had taught her that emotional reactions were weaknesses waiting to be exploited. "I'm not trying to be anything," she said calmly. "I'm just doing my best, same as everyone else should be doing." Marcus laughed without humor. "Right, well maybe your best isn't going to be good enough when things get really tough. We'll see how you handle the field exercises next week. That's when people's true colors show." Sarah recognized that continuing this conversation would achieve nothing positive. "Is there anything else?" "Because I have studying to do." For a moment, Marcus looked like he might push the confrontation further, but Derek grabbed his arm. "Come on, man. Let's go. She's not worth it." They walked away, leaving Sarah alone on the path. She stood there for a moment, breathing slowly to let the adrenaline settle. These kinds of challenges were exhausting in their own way, different from physical training but equally draining. She thought about her father and what he would have said in this situation. Probably something about staying focused on the mission and not letting others distract you from your goals. The following week brought the field exercises that Marcus had mentioned. All recruits were transported to a training facility in the mountains where they would spend 5 days living in the wilderness, practicing navigation, survival skills, and tactical operations. They were divided into small teams of 5 and given various missions to complete. Sarah found herself on a team with Jessica, Marcus, Derek, and another recruit named Tom who kept mostly to himself. The composition was clearly intentional on Chen's part. It's putting people together who needed to learn how to work despite their conflicts. Their first mission was a navigation exercise. Each team received a map, a compass, and coordinates for 5 checkpoints scattered across the mountain terrain. They had to reach all 5 checkpoints and return to base camp within 8 hours. The twist was that each team member would take turns being the navigator. The others had to follow that person's directions without question. Marcus volunteered to go first, confident in his abilities. He studied the map for a few minutes, chose a direction, and started leading the team up the mountain. For the first hour, things went smoothly. But as the terrain became more difficult and the paths less obvious, Marcus's confidence began to crack. He checked the map repeatedly, compared it to the compass, and grew increasingly frustrated when landmarks didn't match what he expected to see. "We should have reached the first checkpoint by now," he muttered, stopping for the 3rd time to reorient himself. Derek looked over his shoulder at the map. "Are you sure we're going the right way? That ridge doesn't look like what's on the map." "I know what I'm doing," Marcus snapped, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his words. They continued for another 30 minutes before Marcus finally admitted they were lost. The team had been walking in roughly the wrong direction and was now off course. They had wasted over 2 hours and still hadn't reached even the first checkpoint. Jessica looked worried. "We're never going to finish all 5 checkpoints at this rate." Tom, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Maybe someone else should navigate for a while." All eyes turned to Sarah, who had been walking quietly at the back of the group, observing everything but saying nothing. She could see the struggle on Marcus's face, the battle between his ego and the practical need to complete the mission. "Fine," Marcus said finally, handing her the map and compass. "Let's see if you can do better." Sarah took the equipment and studied it for less than a minute. Then she looked around at the surrounding terrain, identifying key features and matching them to the topographical indicators on the map. Her father had taught her land navigation when she was 12 years old. training her in various environments until she could find her way through any wilderness. "We're here," she said, pointing to a spot on the map. "The first checkpoint is northwest, about 2 kilometers. But if we continue the way Marcus was going, we'd end up in a valley that would add hours to our time. There's a better route." She traced a path with her finger that took advantage of natural ridgelines and avoided the steepest climbs. "If we go this way, we can reach the first 3 checkpoints in a continuous loop, then backtrack slightly to get the last 2. We'll still make it back on time if we maintain a good pace." Marcus wanted to argue, but couldn't find a flaw in her reasoning. Derek and the others agreed to follow her plan. They set off again, this time with Sarah in the lead. The difference was immediately obvious. Sarah moved through the terrain with confidence, never hesitating at intersections or second-guessing her direction. She identified landmarks efficiently, adjusted their course when necessary, and maintained a steady pace that kept the team moving without exhausting them. They reached the first checkpoint in 45 minutes. The second came 30 minutes after that. By the time they found the third checkpoint, even Marcus had to admit that Sarah knew exactly what she was doing. Her navigation was flawless, her judgment about the terrain accurate, and her leadership natural and unforced. During a brief rest stop after the 4th checkpoint, Jessica pulled out her water bottle and grinned at Sarah. "You're like some kind of superhero. Is there anything you're not good at?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Plenty of things. I'm terrible at singing. I can't draw to save my life, and I always burn toast." The group laughed, and for a moment the tension eased. Even Marcus cracked a small smile, though it was clear he was still struggling with his feelings about the yacht situation. They reached the final checkpoint with an hour to spare before the deadline. The team made it back to base camp, tired but successful, one of only 3 teams to complete all objectives within the time limit. Petty Officer Chen recorded their results without comment, but Sarah noticed a brief nod of approval directed at her that night. As the team sat around campfires eating their rations, the atmosphere had changed noticeably. Other recruits who had previously ignored or dismissed Sarah now sought her out, asking questions about navigation techniques and survival skills. She answered patiently, sharing knowledge without condescension, helping others understand the principles rather than just giving them answers. Marcus sat apart from the main group, staring into the flames. Derek eventually joined him, carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. "You okay?" Derek asked, handing him a cup. Marcus took it and shrugged. "Just thinking about Mitchell." "Yeah." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong about her. I thought she was just showing off or trying to make us look bad. But she's not like that at all. She's just genuinely skilled, and I've been too proud to admit it." Derek nodded slowly. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Marcus said. "Apologize, I guess. Try to learn from her instead of competing against her." The field exercises continued for the next 4 days, each one presenting different challenges. They practiced setting up shelters, purifying water, identifying edible plants, and administering first aid in wilderness conditions. They ran night navigation courses using only starlight. They learned tactical communication and how to move silently through dense forest. Sarah continued to excel at every task. But something had shifted in how she interacted with her team. She began actively teaching the others, taking time to show them techniques and tricks that made difficult tasks easier. When Marcus struggled with knot tying for shelter construction, Sarah sat with him for 20 minutes, patiently demonstrating each step until he could do it correctly. When Jessica panicked during a night navigation exercise, Sarah stayed close and talked her through the fear with a calm, reassuring voice. By the 3rd day, the team had transformed from a collection of individuals into a cohesive unit. They anticipated each other's needs, communicated efficiently, and supported one another through challenges. Even Marcus had set aside his ego and begun actively seeking Sarah's advice when he was unsure about something. On the 4th night, after a particularly grueling day that involved a 12-mile hike carrying full packs and equipment, the team sat together at their campsite. Tom had managed to start a good fire despite the damp wood, and they were all grateful for the warmth as the mountain temperature dropped. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus said to Sarah. He had been building up to this conversation all day. Sarah looked at him across the fire. Go ahead. Why are you really here? I mean, with your skills, you could probably go straight into special operations or some advanced program. Why start at the bottom with the rest of us? It was a fair question, and one that Sarah had been expecting eventually. The truth was complicated, but these people had become more than just teammates over the past weeks. They had earned at least some honesty. My father was Navy, Sarah began. He served for 25 years before he died. He was in special operations, though I didn't know the full details until after he passed. Growing up, he trained me constantly. Physical conditioning, martial arts, survival skills, navigation, everything. At the time, I thought he was just teaching me to be strong and self-sufficient. I didn't realize he was essentially giving me the same training he had received in his unit. The others listened intently, the crackling fire, the only other sound. After he died, I was lost for a while, Sarah continued. I finished college, got a regular job, tried to have a normal life, but I felt like I was wasting the skills and knowledge he had given me. I kept thinking about why he trained me so hard, what he wanted me to do with it all. Eventually, I realized that he was preparing me for this, to be part of something bigger than myself. She paused, looking into the flames. But I didn't want to skip steps or use connections to get ahead. I wanted to start where everyone else starts, to earn my place the same way. I need to prove to myself that I belong here, not because of who my father was, but because of who I am. Jessica wiped her eyes. The story had touched something deep in her, the combination of loss and purpose and determination. Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense? And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for how I acted when we started. I was jealous and insecure, and I took it out on you. That was wrong. Sarah met his eyes. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry if I came across as standoffish or cold. I'm not great at social stuff. I'm better with missions and objectives than with people. Derek laughed. You're better with people than you think. You've basically held this team together. The conversation continued for another hour, with each team member sharing their own stories and reasons for joining the Navy. The walls that had existed between them crumbled away, replaced by genuine friendship and mutual respect. They were no longer just a training team. They were becoming brothers and sisters in arms. The final day of field exercises brought the biggest test yet, a combat simulation. Each team would face a series of tactical scenarios that required quick thinking, physical capability, and coordinated teamwork. They would be evaluated on their performance by multiple instructors, and the results would factor significantly into their overall training scores. The first scenario involved rescuing a simulated injured teammate from hostile territory. One team member would play the casualty, unable to walk, while the others had to navigate through a course filled with obstacles and opposing forces played by instructors. They had to reach the casualty, provide first aid, and extract them to a safe zone within 30 minutes. Sarah's team drew lots to determine who would be the casualty, and Tom was selected. He positioned himself at the designated location while the rest of the team studied the course map and planned their approach. The direct route is fastest, but most exposed, Derek observed. They'll have people watching that path. Jessica pointed to an alternate route. What about going around through this wooded area? It's longer, but provides more cover. Sarah studied the map carefully, noting elevation changes and natural choke points. The woods are a trap. Look at these contour lines. There's a steep ravine we'd have to cross, and that's where they'll ambush us. The direct route is actually safer if we approach it right. Marcus looked skeptical. How do you figure? It's completely open for the last 200 meters. Sarah pulled out a small stick and drew in the dirt, creating a tactical diagram. We split into two elements. Derek and Jessica created diversion here, drawing their attention and forces. Meanwhile, Marcus and I used the distraction to approach from this angle, where the terrain provides a covered approach for most of the distance. We reach Tom, stabilize him, and signal the others. Then we all extract together using covering fire and movement. The plan was risky but sound. Marcus, who had been learning to trust Sarah's judgment, agreed to follow her lead. They synchronized their watches, reviewed hand signals, and prepared to execute. The scenario began with a whistle blast. Derek and Jessica immediately moved toward the obvious approach, making just enough noise to draw attention. As expected, two instructors playing hostile forces moved to intercept them. Sarah and Marcus used that moment to sprint low across open ground, reaching a small depression that provided cover. They moved in short rushes, using every bit of terrain to mask their movement. They reached Tom's position undetected, approaching from an angle the instructors hadn't anticipated. Sarah quickly assessed the simulated injury while Marcus kept watch. "Compound leg fracture," Sarah announced. "We need a splint before we can move him." Working with calm efficiency, Sarah used materials from her pack to create a field splint, immobilizing Tom's leg. Marcus signaled Derek and Jessica, who had been keeping the instructors occupied with feints and repositioning. On Sarah's command, the entire team converged and began the extraction. The instructors, realizing they had been outmaneuvered, attempted to block the extraction route. But Sarah had anticipated this and chose a path that forced the instructors to cross difficult terrain to intercept them. The team moved in coordinated bounds, two people always providing security while the others moved Tom. They reached the safe zone with 3 minutes to spare. Petty Officer Chen, who had been observing the entire scenario, approached Sarah's team as they caught their breath. "Explain your tactical approach," she ordered. Sarah stepped forward and provided a concise breakdown of their plan, including the reasoning behind each decision. Chen listened without expression, then turned to the rest of the team. "Did you all understand the plan before executing it?" They all nodded. Marcus added, "Sarah explained it clearly and made sure we each knew our role." We trusted her assessment of the situation. Chen's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Good, that's what leadership looks like. Not just having the right answer, but making sure your team understands and can execute effectively." Out. She made notes on her clipboard and moved on to evaluate the next team. The remaining scenarios continued throughout the day, each one testing different aspects of their training. Sarah's team consistently performed at the highest level, not because Sarah solved every problem, but because she had helped them become confident and capable operators who could think and act as a unit. During the final scenario, which involved defending a position against a simulated attack, Marcus took the lead in planning their defense. He positioned the team effectively, established fields of fire, and coordinated their response to the attack. When the scenario ended with their successful defense, Sarah was the first to congratulate him. "Well done," she said, genuine pride in her voice. "That was textbook defensive positioning," Marcus grinned. "I had a good teacher." As the sun set on their last day in the field, the teams packed their gear and prepared for the return to base. Sarah stood apart from the group for a moment, looking out over the mountains. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Jessica. "Thank you," Jessica said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For helping us become better. For showing us what's possible when you really commit to something." Sarah smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her usually serious face. "You all did the work. I just pointed you in the right direction sometimes." Still, Jessica insisted. "You're going to do great things in the Navy, I can feel it." Sarah didn't respond. But inside, she felt a warmth that had been absent since her father's death, purpose, belonging, the sense that she was on the right path. These weeks of training had been challenging, but they had also confirmed what she had suspected all along. This was where she was meant to be. The bus ride back to base was loud and energetic, with recruits sharing stories and jokes. Sarah sat with her team, listening more than talking, content to observe their camaraderie. Marcus was in the middle of an animated story about his most embarrassing moment during training, making everyone laugh with his self-deprecating humor. When they arrived back at base, Petty Officer Chen addressed all the teams before dismissing them. "You've completed the field portion of your training. The next few weeks will focus on technical skills, specialized training, and final evaluations. Some of you have exceeded expectations. Others have shown significant improvement. All of you should be proud of what you've accomplished." Her eyes briefly met Sarah's, and there was something in that look that made Sarah stand a little straighter. Recognition, not just of her skills, but of her character and how she had used her abilities to lift others up rather than simply showcase her own superiority. That evening, as Sarah unpacked her field gear and cleaned her equipment, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Commander Harris, the senior officer who had given the orientation speech on their first day. His presence in the enlisted barracks was unusual enough to make Sarah immediately stand at attention. "At ease, Mitchell," he said. "May I come in?" "Of course, sir." Commander Harris entered the small room, his presence seeming to fill the entire space. Jessica, who had been at her desk, quickly stood at attention. Harris gestured for her to relax and turned his attention to Sarah. "I've been reviewing your performance records," he began without preamble. "Top marks in every physical assessment. Exceptional leadership during field exercises. Perfect scores on all academic tests. Your instructors have noted that you possess skills far beyond what we typically see in new recruits." Sarah remained silent, unsure where this conversation was heading. Harris pulled out a folder from under his arm and opened it. "I also took the liberty of looking into your background. Your father was Captain Robert Mitchell. I served with him briefly about 15 years ago. He was one of the finest operators I ever knew." Sarah's heart tightened at the mention of her father. "Yes, sir. He was." "I wasn't aware he had a daughter," Harris continued. "But seeing your performance over these past weeks, I can see his influence clearly. He trained you, didn't he? Gave you the same conditioning and instruction he received in special operations." There was no point in denying it. "Yes, sir. From the time I was very young until his death 4 years ago?" Harris nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "That explains a great deal. The question is, what do you intend to do with that training? You're clearly overqualified for standard service. Have you considered applying for special programs after you complete basic training?" Sarah had thought about this question many times, but had never articulated her answer to anyone in authority. "With respect, sir, I'm not ready for that yet. My father gave me the physical and technical skills. But I need to earn the experience and understanding that comes from serving alongside regular sailors first. I need to learn what it means to be part of a crew, to support a mission, to be someone my teammates can rely on." Harris studied her carefully. "That's a mature perspective. Most people with your abilities would be eager to fast-track their careers. I'm not most people, sir. And I'm not in a hurry. I want to do this right." A slight smile crossed Harris's face. "Your father would be proud of you, Mitchell. Very proud." He closed the folder and tucked it back under his arm. "I'll respect your choice to proceed through standard channels for now. But know that when you're ready, there will be opportunities available to you. The Navy can always use people with your combination of skill and character." "Thank you, sir." Harris turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. Your team performed exceptionally well during the field exercises, largely because of your leadership and instruction. That kind of positive influence on your peers is just as valuable as individual performance. Don't underestimate its importance." After he left, Jessica let out a long breath. What was that about? Sarah sat down on her bunk, still processing the conversation. "I think it was about my father, and maybe about my future." "Are you going to take him up on those opportunities he mentioned?" "Eventually, maybe, but not yet. I meant what I said. I need to learn what it's like to be a regular sailor first." Jessica looked at her friend with admiration. "You know, most people would jump at the chance to get ahead faster. The fact that you're choosing the harder path because it's the right one, that says a lot about who you are." The remaining weeks of basic training passed in a blur of intensive instruction. They learned maritime navigation systems, communication protocols, damage control procedures, and basic seamanship. Sarah continued to excel academically while helping her teammates who struggled with certain subjects. Marcus, in particular, found the technical material challenging and spent many evenings studying with Sarah's patient guidance. The dynamic in Group 7 had completely transformed. Where there had once been competition and resentment, there was now collaboration and mutual support. Other groups noticed, and some tried to replicate it, but the change had to come organically. It couldn't be forced or faked. One afternoon during a break between classes, Derek approached Sarah with an unusual request. "Hey, some of us were talking. We were wondering if you'd be willing to lead some extra physical training sessions in the evenings. Voluntary, just for people who want to push themselves harder. Sarah was surprised. The instructors might not like that. It could seem like we're going around their program. I already asked Petty Officer Chen, Derek said. She thought it was a good idea, said it showed initiative and leadership. Sarah agreed, and that evening, a group of 15 recruits gathered at the track for extra training. She led them through exercises that were challenging but achievable, pushing them just beyond their comfort zones while ensuring proper form and safety. She explained the reasoning behind each exercise, how it related to naval operations, and what specific capabilities it developed. The sessions became popular. Within a week, over 40 recruits were participating regularly. Sarah found herself not just leading exercises, but answering questions about career paths, dealing with stress, and maintaining focus during difficult times. She had somehow become an unofficial mentor to a significant portion of her class. Petty Officer Chen observed these sessions from a distance, never interfering, but clearly monitoring what was happening. One evening, she called Sarah aside after the group dispersed. "You're doing good work with these extra sessions," Chen said. "The recruits who attend are showing measurable improvement in their performance." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm just trying to help." Shen's expression became more serious. "I want to tell you something, Mitchell. I've been an instructor here for 8 years. I've seen thousands of recruits come through this program. Most are adequate. Some are excellent, but very few possess what you have. That combination of skill, humility, and genuine care for your teammates. That's rare. Don't lose it as you advance in your career." "I won't, ma'am." "See that you don't. The Navy needs people like you, especially in leadership positions. But leadership without compassion becomes tyranny, and skill without empathy becomes arrogance. Your father clearly understood that, and he passed it on to you." The mention of her father caught Sarah off guard. "You knew him, ma'am?" Chen nodded. "Briefly, about 12 years ago, I was assigned to a joint training operation where he was one of the lead instructors. He was tough but fair, demanding but supportive. He had a way of making everyone around him better. I see those same qualities in you." The conversation stayed with Sarah long after it ended. She had spent so much time trying to honor her father's memory through her actions that she hadn't fully considered what it meant to embody his values and character. It wasn't just about being skilled or capable. It was about using those abilities to serve others and help them reach their own potential. The final week of basic training arrived with surprising speed. Graduation was scheduled for Friday, with families invited to attend the ceremony. The week was filled with final examinations, inspections, and preparations. Everyone felt the pressure of knowing that 12 weeks of hard work would culminate in this single event. On Wednesday, Sarah received an unexpected message to report to Commander Harris's office. She made her way across the base, wondering what this summons might mean. When she arrived, Harris's assistant directed her to enter immediately. Harris was standing by the window looking out over the training grounds. He turned as she entered and saluted. "At ease, Mitchell? Please, sit down." Sarah sat in the chair across from his desk, her mind racing through possibilities. "I wanted to speak with you before graduation," Harris began. "Your final scores came in, and I thought you should know. You're graduating first in your class. Top marks in every category, highest overall performance rating we've recorded in 3 years. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but kept her expression neutral. "Thank you, sir. There's more," Harris continued. "At graduation, we recognize outstanding recruits with special awards. You're receiving the Admiral's Leadership Award, given to one recruit each cycle who demonstrates exceptional leadership and positive influence on their peers. The award comes with an automatic promotion and first choice of duty assignments." This was unexpected. Sarah had heard of the Admiral's Award, but had never imagined receiving it. "I'm honored, sir. But I should mention that my entire team contributed to our success during training. Marcus Johnson showed tremendous growth in leadership. Jessica Torres demonstrated courage and determination. Derek and Tom both excelled in their own ways." Harris smiled. "I'm aware of your team's performance, and they will all receive commendations. But this award is specifically about your individual impact. You didn't just excel personally. You elevated everyone around you. That's the mark of true leadership. Thank you, sir. I'll do my best to live up to it. I have no doubt you will. Now, about your duty assignment. As the award recipient, you have first choice of available positions. There are several options. He handed her a list of assignments ranging from ship duty to shore stations to specialized training programs. Sarah scanned the list carefully. One option immediately caught her attention. A position on a destroyer based out of Norfolk, the same class of ship her father had served on early in his career. I'd like this one, sir. The destroyer assignment. Harris raised an eyebrow. That's a demanding position for a new sailor. Long deployments, intense operational tempo. Are you sure? Yes, sir. I want to learn from experienced sailors to be part of a crew facing real challenges. That's where I'll grow the most. Very well. I'll process the assignment. Harris stood, indicating the meeting was concluding. Congratulations, Mitchell. Your father would be incredibly proud. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. Sarah told her team about the award, and their reaction was a mixture of pride and celebration. Marcus organized an impromptu party in the recreation room where the entire group gathered to congratulate her. Even recruits from other groups stopped by to offer their respect and appreciation for how she had helped them during training. Jessica pulled Sarah aside during the celebration. You know, this changes everything, right? You're going to have expectations on you now, people watching to see if you can live up to this recognition. Sarah had thought about this. I know, but I'm not going to change who I am or how I approach things. I'll just keep doing my best and helping others when I can. That's exactly the right answer, Jessica said with a smile. Graduation day arrived with perfect weather. Clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that made the flags snap crisply as they flew over the ceremony grounds. Family members filled the bleachers while the graduating recruits stood in perfect formation on the parade ground. Sarah's mother had made the trip from California, sitting in the front row with tears already forming in her eyes. The ceremony followed traditional naval protocol. The commanding officer gave a speech about service and sacrifice. Individual awards were presented. The recruits recited their oaths. Finally, Commander Harris stepped forward to announce the Admiral's Leadership Award. This award is given to the recruit who best exemplifies the values of the Navy: honor, courage, and commitment, Harris announced, his voice carrying across the grounds. This year's recipient demonstrated exceptional skill while also elevating the performance of everyone around them. Through leadership by example and genuine care for their teammates, this individual embodied everything we hope to develop in our sailors. He paused, letting the suspense build. Many in the audience already suspected who would be named, but the official announcement still carried weight. The Admiral's Leadership Award goes to Seaman Recruit Sarah Mitchell. Sarah stepped forward as applause erupted. She marched to the podium where Harris waited with the award, a plaque and medal recognizing her achievement. As he pinned the medal to her uniform, he leaned in slightly and whispered, "Make us proud, sailor." "I will, sir," Sarah whispered back. After the ceremony ended and the formations dissolved, Sarah was immediately surrounded by her teammates and fellow recruits. Marcus pushed through the crowd and gave her an enthusiastic hug. "You did it. Though honestly, we all knew it would be you." "We all did it together," Sarah corrected. "This award belongs to our whole team." Her mother approached, moving slowly through the crowd, her eyes red from crying. When she reached Sarah, she simply held her daughter for a long moment without speaking. Finally, she pulled back and looked at Sarah's face. "Your father is watching," her mother said softly, "and he's so proud, just as I am." Sarah felt tears forming in her own eyes, but fought them back. "I did this for him, to honor everything he taught me." "I know, and you've done more than that. You've become your own person, not just his daughter." That would mean even more to him. Throughout the afternoon, Sarah received congratulations from instructors, commanders, and fellow recruits. Petty Officer Chen approached late in the day after most of the crowd had dispersed. "Remember what I told you, Mitchell," Chen said. "Keep that combination of skill and compassion. The Navy will try to harden you to make you focus only on mission and objectives. Don't let it. The human element is what separates good leaders from great ones." "I'll remember, ma'am. Thank you for everything you taught me." Jin nodded and walked away, but Sarah could have sworn she saw the instructor smile slightly as she left. That evening, Sarah stood alone on the parade ground where the ceremony had taken place hours earlier. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. She held the photograph of her father that she had kept by her bunk throughout training. In the picture, he stood tall and proud in his uniform, a slight smile on his face. "I made it, Dad," she said quietly to the photograph. "I'm a sailor now, just like you. And I promise I'll keep learning, keep growing, keep being someone you can be proud of." Breeze picked up, rustling the flags that still flew over the base. Sarah stood there for a long moment, feeling connected to something larger than herself. Her journey was just beginning. The destroyer assignment would bring new challenges, new opportunities to learn and serve. There would be difficult times ahead, moments of doubt and struggle. But she was ready. The weeks of being underestimated and mocked seemed like ancient history now. Those who had laughed at the quiet novice had learned that assumptions based on appearance and demeanor were often wrong. Sarah hadn't needed to prove herself through boasting or showing off. She had simply done the work, helped her teammates, and let her actions speak for themselves. As she walked back toward the barracks for the last time, Sarah thought about the path ahead. She knew that her skills and training put her on a trajectory toward special operations eventually. Her father had prepared her for that from childhood, whether intentionally or not. But she also knew she had been right to take the slower path, to earn her place through standard service first. The Navy would test her in new ways. Ship life would be different from training. Real operations would carry actual consequences. But Sarah felt confident that she had built a foundation strong enough to support whatever came next. More importantly, she had learned that leadership wasn't about being the best individual performer. It was about making everyone around you better, about creating teams that could achieve more together than any individual could alone. Marcus, Jessica, Derek, and Tom would be going to different assignments, but they had promised to stay in touch. They had formed bonds during training that would last throughout their careers. Sarah knew that years from now, when she looked back on her time in the Navy, these friendships would be among the memories she treasured most. Her mother was waiting at the barracks with Sarah's packed belongings. Tomorrow, they would fly home for a brief leave before Sarah reported to her new assignment in Norfolk. But tonight, Sarah wanted to take one last walk around the base that had transformed her from a civilian with unusual skills into a sailor with purpose and direction. She passed the obstacle course where she had first demonstrated her physical capabilities. The pool where her swimming abilities had surprised everyone. The classroom where she had helped Marcus understand complex technical concepts. The track where she had led evening training sessions for volunteers. Each location held memories of growth, challenge, and achievement. At the base of the flagpole, in the center of the grounds, Sarah stopped and looked up at the colors still flying in the evening light. She came to attention and saluted, holding the position for several seconds. It was a personal gesture, not required or observed by anyone else. A moment of private commitment to the ideals represented by those flags and the uniform she now wore. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings, a new assignment, new teammates, new challenges to overcome. But tonight, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself a moment of satisfaction and pride. She had completed basic training not just with distinction, but with her character and values intact. She had proved that it was possible to excel without arrogance, to lead without domination, to succeed while lifting others up. Those who had mocked the quiet novice at the beginning of training had learned a valuable lesson. True capability doesn't need to announce itself. Real strength doesn't require constant demonstration. And the most dangerous opponents are often the ones who seem least threatening at first glance. Sarah smiled to herself as she lowered her salute and headed back to collect her mother. The journey had just begun, but she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Her father's legacy lived on, not in memories of the past, but in the actions of his daughter serving with honor, courage, and commitment. And somewhere, Sarah believed, he was watching and smiling with pride at the sailor she had become.